Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Now, let's start our webinar session 2 of the Brand Playbook webinar series. I am Srivalli, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. And let me quickly introduce our speaker and let's have a run through of what we've done in our previous webinar. Let me introduce Neha Singh, a creative director, strategic branding specialist, and an educator with over 18 years of experience in graphic design and brand strategy. Neha is the founder and creative director of Moron Design, a design studio built on philosophy of clarity, principles, and impactful storytelling. Under her leadership, the studio has delivered award winning results, collaborating with brands across industries to craft compelling narratives that leave a lasting impression. Beyond her leadership in the design industry, Neha is an adjunct faculty at Ahmedabad University, where she empowers students with the art and science of strategic branding and packaging design. Through her expertise, she guides the next generation of designers and marketers in dissecting, strategizing, and creating brands that go beyond aesthetics, building immersive and meaningful brand experiences. Thank you, Neha. Now, the stage is all yours. We can start
Thank
with
you
our.
so much. Thank you for that introduction again. And welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I hope you had some valuable insights, some good takeaways from the last session. This is going to be more intensive. The first in the series was Think Like Your Customer. Today we're going to talk about brand strategies that last and how to actually create brand strategies. So in the last session, to do a very quick recap, we identified the difference between strategy and planning, where strategy is you pick one door, one pathway, and you forget about every other possibilities out there, and you just focus on one direction, one path to reach to your defined vision. And planning is what you do in order to reach that particular vision. We also discuss the who and the how, which is the company and category, finding who you are and finding where do you stand within the category, within your entire market, defining your core target group, and understanding the culture in which your core target group exists. So we also spoke about, how do you define the TAM SAM of your core target audience, and then getting into the absolute depth of psychology behind your core TG. So demography is the first part. Yes, everybody knows and talks about it, but the differentiator now in today's times is understanding the psychography. So what are the motivators? What are the things that don't work for your audiences? So exact detailed pain points that you can then address as a hero. And the exercise we gave in the last session was identifying your top villains. Now let's ask how many of us have done our homework. Let's please raise your hands or write on the messages that you've found your villains.
Basically, ma'am, we have find three villains that are selection process, similarity, and the pricing, according to me, ma'am.
If you could give a brief about your business.
Ma'am, basically, we are running a toy business, and till now
Hmm.
we have generated 3 lakhs per month, and now we have to shift towards the building of brand so that we can connect with the local market and we can make it in we can make it stand out in a global platform. Basically,
Fair.
recently you might be knowing that PM Modi, respected Prime Minister, has recently talked about the local toy. So
Hmm.
there are basically many local toy. They are from Bhiwadi and Chatpannam toys. We are working with them so that we
Hmm.
can make Indian brand, Indian toys on a global stage. Not that
Okay, so these
traditional
are
teddy bear
indigenous.
one.
So these are
Yeah.
indigenous toys. These are not
Yeah,
made in
these are
China.
basically indigenous toys, not like previous
Okay.
toys, which were basically a teddy bear, bamboo panda. So we are basically
Uh-huh.
dealing with that. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So what were the three villains you said? Selection.
Ma'am, selection process, similarity, and pricing.
Okay. Now, why would you say selection is a villain? I think
Uh,
I'll just dive a little deep into one so that everybody understands, and then we can move forward. Does that work, Vali?
Yes, Neha, that works.
Okay, great. So tell me, why is selection a villain?
Ma'am, selection of process was a villain for us because there were many categories that we have to enter. And at last, we have thought that entering into indigenous market would be better. Already we were in the loss also because of a traditional market, which is of basically teddy bear. We have worked in India Mart also, and from there I have understood that selecting a product was itself a big problem for us in the early stage, because there is one company, if we, as according to your previous session, if I see that you told me that focus on that brand which has not that too big, but according to your situation is a villain. So if I see there's one company that is Toy Shine, so they are also
Hmm.
making some these type of products. So selection of process, so selection process was one of the villain. And ma'am, secondly, similarity.
Understood.
Yeah,
We'll go into similarity a little later.
okay.
Before that, I want to ask a generic question to everybody. The question is, how many of us have identified the business villains? So, what is as a founder, as a business owner, or as a marketer, what are the problems that you are facing? How many of us have identified that as the villains? I appreciate the honesty, PW. However, it would have been good if you would have done it. You can probably think about it now. But so the point here was identifying the villain for your audiences, not for the businesses, right? So in the process of, let's say, toy का जो market है, toy के market में, as an audience, as a person that wants to buy, what are my core problem areas, right? So आपको ऑडियंस के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से सोचना है, बिजनेस के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से नहीं, बिकॉज यू वांट टू बिकम अ हीरो फॉर योर ऑडियंस, राइट? तो यू आइडेंटिफाई देयर विलन सो दैट यू कैन बिकम द हीरो, कि आप उनके प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व कर रहे हो। जैसे हमने लास्ट टाइम ऑटो और उबर का पॉइंट डिस्कस किया था, राइट? कि the user behavior at one point of time was, as an audience I had to go all the way to the rickshaw stand, or I had to stand in the middle of the street and wave indefinitely for me to wait for an auto. वो धूप में मैं खड़ी हूँ तो धूप is my villain, बारिश हो रही है, बारिश is my villain, right? So weather in general conditions are a villain for my audience. Now, as Uber or as Ola, I am becoming the hero and solving the problem for my audience. So, हमें audience के point of view से villain define करने हैं, right? So, all of you, please look at it from the other side of the table, from the audience's point of view, and redo this exercise. So, sir, I'm so sorry I forgot your name, but the person who's
Apartment.
into top, yes, Path. So, Parth, I think that sort of answered your question, right? So you thought from
Yes,
the
ma'am.
business side of things.
Yeah.
Think of it from the audience side of things. आपको अलग villains नजर आएंगे. फिर आप you become the hero and you solve those problems for your audience. That's how you create
Okay.
the differentiation. ठीक है?
Okay. Okay.
फारूकी जी, आपका भी ये पॉइंट पढ़ के मेरे को वही लग रहा है कि आपने बिजनेस साइड ऑफ थिंग्स की बात करी है. आई थिंक वी कैन डू वन मोर राउंड ऑफ दिस एक्सरसाइज एंड प्रॉब्ली टॉक अबाउट इट इन द नेक्स्ट सेशन. मीनवाइल, अभी आई विल कंटिन्यू. सो this was what we did till the last session. Now we're going to talk about कि हम brand बनाते कैसे हैं, right? So before we go into that, let's understand brand होता क्या exactly. So quickly, let's unmute and answer. And we'll start with Saket since he has, sorry, Sanket, since he has raised his hand. कि brand होता क्या है?
I'm Jyotirmay. So, from my understanding, what I understand a brand is what makes people actually be loyal to the brand and give preference to the products of that brand or services of that brand over other brand.
Great. That is a great answer. So now let me ask this question. What is the difference between a business and a brand?
Hi,
Yeah.
my name is Aditi. The difference between a brand and a business is business is more depend on a transaction. Okay, it is more of a transaction that is like which can be like which results in profit and loss. That's the core fundamental blueprint of a business. A brand is it's a intangible or a very tangible identity that it's a very a tangible or intangible identity whether it is in a product or a service, and it gives you an experience or a feeling. So that is the difference. Business is more of a transaction basis. So basically, that when that experience converts into monetary gain or loss, that becomes a business.
Interesting, interesting. Anybody else?
Quite rightly, business is mostly transactional. But brand goes beyond transaction and tries to make a long-term relationship with the customers.
Perfect, perfect.
Business is basically it can be a mere transaction or it can be a mere entity for performing the task. But brand is all about the emotions, creating a different league and distinguish identities, which has emotional value, which has value stored for particular thing that we are creating.
You have the salt business, the business of creating a salt, like the manufacturing of
Hmm.
the salt. But
Hmm.
when you think of the salt, you say Tata Salt, or when
Hmm.
you go to
Hmm.
the market, you say Tata Salt. So
Hmm.
Tata is a brand, and it kind of it gives a face or an experience or an identity to the business or to the whole producing or manufacturing or the servicing process. So maybe that
Correct.
could help people to
So
understand the difference.
this is a great example because there are certain brands that become category definers, such as Tata Salt. तो वो मतलब salt का पूरा category ही Tata define कर रहा है, right? So this is a great example.
In the local term, if people don't know about food services, they just say there is one. They just say that Zomato kar lo. So Zomato has become that type of a brand that every common people, every people coming from that background that they do not know how the food delivery works, but still they say Zomato kar lo. So that is a
Correct.
brand. Brand can be a value.
Correct. So top of mind recall, and where you become part of the category itself. So yes, let me just try and explain this in a slightly more simplistic way. Wherein, say for instance, if you're a business and आप पिछले 10 साल से you've been into business and you're doing really well, you're doing say 5 CR of annual revenue. Today or tomorrow, if you have to go meet a new customer, तो आप उसको let's say within the same geographical location, or if you're going to a new geographical location, when you meet a new person, आपको you have to explain the entire business all over again, right? You have to build that credibility all over again. आप अगर कोई भी न्यू कस्टमर अक्वायर कर रहे हो, जैसे फॉर इंस्टेंस बात, इफ यू हैव टू गेट, इफ देयर इज अ न्यू पर्सन वॉकिंग इनटू योर स्टोर टू बाय योर टॉय, आपको यू विल हैव टू एक्सप्लेन द एंटायर हिस्ट्री टू दैट पर्सन. सो व्हाई इज दिस प्रोडक्ट सो वैल्यूएबल, सो दिस इज द हिस्ट्री, दिस इज हु वी आर, दिस इज व्हाई वी आर डूइंग दिस एक्सेट्रा. आपको पूरा वापस से समझाना पड़ता है. So that is essentially the core of a business where it is transactional, it is all about getting sales, it's all about revenue and all of that. But the only difference, the core difference between a business and a brand is that your customer, your people, your core audience will have a preconceived idea about you when you're meeting them for the first time. They will know something about you, and that something depends on what you have communicated so far, but they will have an idea about it before they make the purchase with you, right? So in short, as you all rightly pointed out, that business is all about getting repeat sales, it's revenue driven, whereas brand is about creating a community that gives you an edge, gives you a leverage, right? So that whether you're speaking to a new customer, or you're entering a new market, or you're going into a new territory, your base is already set. You don't have to start from ground zero. Apple is was into computers. Apple was not into anything else, right? Their core proposition was, we are really good with technology and user interface and all of that. We make solid machines. But when they entered, I what's that pod thingy, music wala? What is it called? I'm just forgetting.
Apple Music.
Apple Music, nahi, the first instrument that they had launched,
iPod.
iPod. People lined up to buy it. They were not into making gadgets for sound, but because they had created that leverage about their brand, people lined up to buy iPods. Tomorrow, if they sell shoes, people will line up to buy shoes as well. So this is what brand does. It builds a loyal base of audience that then trusts you for what you do, for what you're trying to sell. Now, Coca-Cola. is a world famous brand, but in the entire equity, Coca-Cola's identity, just the identity has about 60 to I don't know 60 to 65% share of their equity. So that is the power of a strong brand. Now, how do we do it? So that's the core question, right? I'm sure all of you are thinking कि ठीक है brand बनाना बोल रहे हैं brand बनाना जरूरी है, but how do you do it? So in this session, we're going to cover the crux, the overview of how do you approach creating a brand, right? So what are the core steps that you have to take in order to create a legacy brand, in order to build the story? So, how do you reach to the point where you can create a strong story? However, this is a very, very broad overview. Now, when you're thinking about creating your brand, there are three C's that you have to always remember: clarity, consistency, and consciousness. We'll talk about each in a little bit of detail. So the first thing, branding करता क्या है? It essentially creates a spotlight on your entire business, right? Now spotlight दो तरीके के होते हैं. The first is a blue ocean, where you are offering something that nobody else in the market does. Sure. So by definition, you are giving something to the audience that nobody else can offer, and automatically people will gravitate towards you because you're the only one giving that service, right? These are a couple of examples of एब्सोल्यूट ब्लू ओशन स्ट्रेटजीज. मतलब फोन पे जब इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ था मार्केट में, उस टाइम पे द यूपीआई बेस्ड सर्विस डिड नॉट एग्जिस्ट एट ऑल. भारत पे, जी पे, एवरीथिंग एल्स केम मच लेटर. But when PhonePe came in, they had the first mover advantage. They captured the market really well. Currently, also they are on top. Similarly, Nika. So we had e-commerce, we had quick commerce. You have all of those things, but specifically for beauty products, there really was nothing. That's when Nika came in. It identified that niche, that gray area which nobody else had, and they just came in and they dominated the market. They're still dominating the market. Which are some brands which you can recognize, which you can remember as Blue Ocean? Let's quickly have uh, previous slide. Okay, somebody has asked me to show the previous slide, but before that, I'm asking the question. Please write your answers in the chat. Some blue ocean brands that you guys can think of. Say, for instance, Uber at one point of time was absolute blue ocean, which is nobody had the service that they did. This one, this previous slide. YouTube, yes, that's a great example. Airbnb, yes, correct. In fact, I feel Adobe is also a great example because while you have Canva and stuff, but nobody has what Adobe offers. Somebody was asking for previous slide. I'm assuming this is the one. Kodak, and that's interesting. JP Morgan, okay. Dunzo, yes. Duolingo, right? So Duolingo is an app that lets you learn languages. So this is one way in which you can automatically create a brand because कोई और है ही नहीं, वो exist ही नहीं करता. आप एक blue ocean में हो. Byju's was, while it is shut down now, but when it came in, it was something that nobody else had. So by definition, you become, top of mind for people because nobody else is offering it. Dalda ghee, that's that's interesting. All right, so moving on. ये एक टाइप का प्रोसेस होता है, बट मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम्स वी आर इन द रेड ओशन वेयर, let's take Path's example again. Toy industry. There are so many different competitors, like right from industry leaders such as Hamleys to your local vendor, जो आपको हर तरह के China made plastic के toys दे रहा है, right? The market is cluttered with options that the audience can choose from. Now, within that, you have to create a spotlight on yourself. So, how do you do that? Typically, the market is divided into market leaders and a group of people who are fighting. So, these brands, such as Cred. Now, Cred is something that offers online payment solutions, right? Credit card bill आपको sell कर मतलब easily pay off करने के लिए देता है. Now, there are so many different apps, including bank apps, which allow you to do that as well. But Cred created a unique positioning for itself, right? Similarly, Oyo, in a world where you have hotels, you have so many different options to choose from, you had one Oyo and you have one Airbnb, right? Airbnb has also created its own niche by offering a very unique proposition. So has Oyo, right? Now, rack your heads to identify which are the other brands that you think have sort of created this niche for themselves by giving a unique story or by creating an offering that nobody else has. So, creating a white ocean in a red ocean, where you create a space for yourself, आप सारी fishes को वहां से हटा देते हो और अपना एक space create करते हो. Can you name a few brands? Yes, Aditi.
So something like menstrual cups by P Safe, or like Nua, um like in a place where pads are so much in use, they have created a kind of a dominance, and for people to use menstrual cups by positioning that what it's eco-friendly, long term में budget friendly है. So that is what,
So,
because the
so,
market is.
Aditi, yeah, you're absolutely right. However, ये एक new category introduction है, right? So the brand that you mentioned probably was one of the first entrants. But within that market, there is another brand जिसका नाम मैं अभी भूल रही हूँ. But they have created a small little innovation where they've added a slight loop at the end. So that is a white ocean.
Okay, so okay, let me just tweak it my answer. Okay, so we all know about nail condoms, right? Okay, like
Mm-hmm.
Kama Sutra, itna kuch hai.
Mm-hmm.
And so what? So P-Safe का भी एक different category है called Domina. Okay, so they
Mm-hmm.
created female condoms. So it was this thing. So it was something that nobody offered. Like contraceptive, जो large scale contraceptive ये जो brands है Durex and everything else, they were selling to male. It was a
Mm-hmm.
kind of a spotlight on the red ocean. That market is cluttered. So creating something for the female contraceptive which is reusable, which can be bought easily and does not affect your hormones. So they targeted that.
Fair point. Great. Anybody else? How is CK White Ocean? Alright, Comet offers diverse sneaker shoes. White Hat Junior was a category creation. Yes. There's a fan fairness cream has gone. Yes, it has. Adidas, okay. Um, no, Nike and Adidas are not really. So they are the dominant players in the market. So any market has people who dominate the market, which is they capture approximately 70% share of the market, and then you have the baki ka 30%, which is sort of a lot of players are sort of cluttered within that space. So market leaders by definition will have top of mind recall. Correct? We're talking about who within this red ocean of a lot of clutter where there are a lot of fishes, who within that 30% have created a white ocean for themselves, where they've carved a niche for themselves. So I think this is probably a little food for thought for you, all of you. Orient fans, oh, that's an interesting point. Yes, Orient fans for sure. Right. Boat is a great example. uh, Boat, in fact, has really successfully captured the market and created a white ocean for themselves in a market that was extremely unorganized. Now, organizing an unorganized market is a huge task because user behavior ही नहीं है, right? People are not used to buying. या तो आप JBL खरीद रहे हो या Apple खरीद रहे हो या फिर आप चाइना खरीद रहे हो. So boat came in and created a whole category wherein people are now become boat heads, which is a great success story for any brand. So moving on, the point here is, And it was great that we ended on boat is because they have created such a smart single point statement for themselves, which is what is it? Anybody's guess? Yes, Aditi?
I mean, I use all kinds of this thing. So Boat, I think, made wireless. You know, how would I say, like, wearing wireless a cool statement, like, wireless watches, earphones, and other things. So it kind of created that hands free and wireless system of tracking your lifestyle and music and
Yeah, so it's something that is, yeah. So, however, I think that was already introduced by Apple. So Apple had already made it cool. Those neck bands and these earphones, wireless earphones. So Apple had already made it very cool to have colorful things hanging from your ear. But Boat then came in, and it came in with Tune into Nirvana. So it came with a very, very strong style statement. And it built a community around that style statement, right? So that's what it is about. That's in essence, that's what it is about. That you find that one thing, that one commitment that you're going to make, which is brand truth actually. And you just live that every day. Just continue to deliver that every day. That's what it is all about. Now, how do we get there? So, the way that we get to this single point sentence, which is extremely important, is पहले तो आप first step is always understand yourself. Where do you stand? Where are your strengths and everything, and then you get into the competition. So identify your top competitors. Now here benchmark nahi aayega. Like if I am selling shoes, I will not look at Adidas or Nike because they are the industry benchmark. I'll look at them for inspiration to see what is working, what have they done that has worked for them, but they are not my competition. My core competition is, and the simplest way in which you can define or identify a competition is, आपका ऑडियंस आपके तरफ चल के आ रहा है, अचानक से वो डिविएट होके कहीं और चला गया, वो कहाँ गया? दिस विल टेल यू डायरेक्ट कंपटीशन कौन है एंड इनडायरेक्ट पेरिफेरल कंपटीशन कौन है. लाइक अगर हम जोमेटो की बात कर रहे हैं तो जोमेटो इज अ कंपटीशन टू अ रेस्टोरेंट ओनर, राइट? बिकॉज रेस्टोरेंट ओनर का उसके बाजू में या उसके पेरिफेरी 100 मीटर रेडियस में जो रेस्टोरेंट है वो तो कंपटीशन है ही, बट जोमेटो इज ऑल्सो कंपटीशन बिकॉज इट्स अ पेरिफेरी, इट्स अ लैटरल कंपटीशन, राइट? इनडायरेक्ट कंपटीशन है बट कंपटीशन है. सो simplest way for you to think about competition is your audience is walking towards you, अचानक से वो deviate होके कहीं और चला गया. Where are those places where they're going? Identify top 3 to 4 such competition, and obviously it has to be a lot more, but to start with, identify top three to four competition and do in-depth research about them. Understand what are their talking points, understand वो कौन से टोन ऑफ वॉइस में बात कर रहे हैं, वो क्या सेल कर रहे हैं, कौन सी यूनिक चीज सेल कर रहे हैं. Are they how are they marketing themselves on social media? What are the audiences saying about them? Reviews padho unka. Like really go in depth and understand all of them as much as you can, because once you do that you will get your POPs and PODs, which are points of parity and points of differences. मतलब कहाँ पे आप सिमिलर हो बाकी सबसे, और कहाँ पे कौन से 2 4 5 चीजें हैं जो आप डिफरेंटली कर रहे हो, nobody else is doing it. Now, these are some tools for you to do this research, this study a little more in detail. The first one is Google Trends, simplest है. वहाँ पे जाके आपको अपना कैटेगरी के ऊपर कैटेगरी के बारे में सर्च करना है, एंड you can search your competition's website also. If you have your website, you can search of that also. It will give you a comparison कि आपके website traffic में in context to your competition, what are the ups and downs. It will also give you what are the demographics, कहाँ से आ रहे हैं आपके पास लोग, and all of that information. So that is the first starting point, which gives you a broad overview. Then you move on to similarweb.com. Now, I was intending to do a live demo of that site, but unfortunately, the site seems to be down. I'll try again once. But I do have a screen recording, thankfully, so I can share that with you. Yeah, the site is not working. So once you type similarweb.com and you search your category, you will be taken to a page like this where you'll have a lot of different points of navigation. I hope the screen is visible. So there'll be a lot of navigation point on the side, and this overview will give you all of this description. So let's say if you put in your top competitor, you will get कि उनका और traffic कहाँ से आ रहा है website के ऊपर. So clearly organic search for these guys are the most important thing. Apart from that, it will also tell you branded versus non-branded. So what are the search terms that you can use? कहाँ से आ रहे हैं सबसे ज़्यादा audiences? टॉप रेफरल साइट्स मतलब विच साइट्स आर रिकमेंडिंग कि यहाँ से बैकलिंकिंग कहाँ से किया हुआ है. देन दिस इज व्हाट इज मोस्ट इंटरेस्टिंग. इट विल टेल यू कहाँ से लोग आ रहे हैं. इट विल ऑल्सो टेल यू डेमोग्राफिक डेटा. ठीक है, कितना परसेंटेज ऑफ विमेन मैन, उनका एज डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन. दिस इज वेरी वेरी वैल्यूएबल इंसाइट व्हेन यू आर. भाई पॉज हो जा. Right. So when you're looking at identifying your audience, this is also a form of validation, which tells you, okay, आपने ये point identify किया है, वो सही है कि नहीं. And again, we go back to the SOM. Now, your SOM cannot be people from 18 to 65 years of age, because that becomes a very very broad audience. It has to be narrower audience. So here is where you can find your core कि okay, ये मेरे maximum number of लोग इधर से इनके पास आ रहे हैं. Maybe I can focus on this 25 to 35 का bracket. Again, it will give you all these keywords that your audience is interested in. And this is all for your top competitor. This is not your data. This is you're spying on your competitors' data, which turns out to be very valuable when you're looking at where should you be heading. So isme you can also search your benchmarks. Because you will know then ki what is working so like best for your benchmark. This is ads library. Again, ये बहुत ही एक strong tool है. Since the last time we were talking about dermatology, that's what I've searched here. Here, Facebook will give you all the ads that the people have run on the particular keyword. So this is a great tool for you to research and check what are your competition, what are they talking about, what are their core selling points. So यहाँ से आपको काफी सारे insights मिल सकते हैं, and then you can look at finding your differentiator कि okay, let's say they are talking about this, how about I talk about something else.
Yes, ma'am. I have one question. So
Yes.
basically, like, can you just confirm? It's something about my understanding. So you mentioned that the market is divided into two categories. One is like market leader, and the second one is where people who are fighting. Now you also mentioned to create a white ocean in the red ocean. So is red ocean these people who are fighting?
Yes.
Okay, so white ocean is basically like how do we as a brand differentiate ourselves? Like what is our unique proposition?
What is your, yeah, exactly. What is your unique proposition? Now, Martin Neumeyer, he is the father, or rather, he's one of the greatest in branding. It's his quote, which says that in a place, in a market which is highly competitive, which means you have way too many people, it always helps to have specialization. So you only talk about one specialization, so that anybody who needs that will come to you. They'll directly gravitate to you. So this is a sort of interpretation of the same thing, that if you're in the red ocean, you create one value proposition, you create one niche that gravitate people towards you. So that's how you end up creating a spotlight on yourself.
Hi, so I have a question. So let's just say I want to create a brand that it's a sexual health brand, which caters to women from their menarche to the menopause, and because and I want and also about their sexual pleasure. So my audience category is wide because it has, like, from people from 13 to people who are 40, 45, who are also entering menopause, and also women who are using who are lactating. So how do I, because how do I define my audience, because it has different
Great.
categories of audience.
That's a great question, Aditi. So there is
And I
in
don't want to
order
do one
for
category, because I'll tell you the reason is that I don't want to do one category. Because I feel that the whole thing of there is no brand yet. I mean, all of them talks about one thing, but I think a little more like, I want people to trust the women, and also people who identify themselves as women. Uh, to access a brand that takes care of their entire sexual reproductive health, whether they are periods, or whether they are when they are lactating, whether they want to self pleasure themselves, or when they are having hot flashes during their menopause. So all that
I
I want
understand.
to take care of it. So, and the
I
audience is really wide. So I want to
Correct.
put
So
everything under one umbrella. Like, this is my brand.
understood.
Yeah.
Correct. So Aditi, I'll just it's a very very wide question and it requires a lot of in-depth responses. ठीक है? And it also requires you to understand the subject of branding a little more in detail because there are too many variables associated with what you're asking. There's no simple answer that I can give you right away. What I can tell you though is that there's something called as a brand umbrella, right? Now, once you create a brand umbrella, all of these different offerings will be in a structured format. Now, for you to understand what a for you to understand what a brand umbrella is, you have to really go in depth of the subject. Right now, we're covering I mean, it in a broad overview sort of a format. So, hence, I said that it's a question that requires a lot of learning before we get to the answers. So, to answer your question, still, you have to create a brand umbrella which adds structure to your brand. Now, once you do that, once you have clear hierarchy of what is your hero product, what are your subordinate products, what is it that you want to talk about at the get go, what is it that you want to educate people before you talk about it, once you get that clarity, that's when you will find your core talking point. Once you have your core talking point, you then categorize your audiences into different personas, into different segments. So your audience, let's say from 13 to 18, will be one set. From 18 to 25 or 30 will be one set because their problems are different. Their needs are different. You cannot have one story that sells to all, correct? So you will have to then go into different segments and speak to them differently. However, your core brand story will have to remain the same. So it is a complex exercise since your offering is rather complex. So you have to go through the in-depth process. Probably you might have to go into a bit more in-depth learning to understand how the process works. But this is in the shortest possible way. This is the best way I can answer your question. Did that make sense to you? More often, we lose business to a competitor who has no competition to our business on social media in terms of follower engagement rate. So, how do we talk? I'm so sorry, I didn't quite understand the question. Uh, Suparna, would it be possible for you to speak the question or ask the question on mic? More often than not, we lose business to a competitor who has no competition to our business on social media. So you're saying a person has no social media presence, but they are still you are losing business to them. How do we tackle that? Is that the question? I'm a little unclear. It'll be great if you could further explain the question. Meanwhile, should we go? Should we move forward? So coming back to the tools, Facebook Ads Library is a great tool for you to research what your competition is talking about, and that will give you perhaps some insight as to what is it that you should not talk about, right? So what not to do is as important as what to do. Inflact and Modash are two sites that help you understand the social media engagement of your competition and for your own pages if you have. So both these sites are really good, but and both of them have only business page registration. So if you have a business email ID, only then you'll be able to register on them, which is a bit of a problem. But if you do, and if you search for it, you get a certain free trial timeline. It's really good for the first round of research for your audiences, how social listening of your audience and listening of your competition. So what are the kind of content pieces that are working for your competition? So these are two great websites for that. Now, once you do all of this in-depth research and analysis, you will get to the specific POPs and PODs. So these are the websites: trends.google.com, similarweb.com, Facebook Ads Library, Inflact, and Modash. Now you can also use ChatGPT for your preliminary research, but you will need to really do prompt engineering, because ChatGPT or even Perplexity don't always give the most authentic responses. If you all want, we can cover a bit of that in the next session. Please respond on chat if you're interested in knowing how to do that, how to research using GPT. All right, so once we do our research, we'll get to the specific POPs and POTs. These are the most important things. You might have to, after doing in-depth research, you might find two or three unique points of differences which you can really hone upon. Now, what you do is you couple that with your top villain. ठीक है, आपको अपना पॉइंट ऑफ डिफरेंस, कोर पॉइंट ऑफ डिफरेंस मिल गया कि दिस इज समथिंग दैट आई डू which nobody else does in the market. It could be the smallest thing or it could be the biggest thing, it does not matter. It may or may not be a feature or a benefit that you provide. It may just be an emotional modifier, right? It could just be a behavioral thing, added point that you can give. तो आप इसको अपने टॉप विलन के साथ कंबाइन करो, क्रिएट अ ब्रिज, एंड दैट विल गिव यू योर गैप. तो पूरा मार्केट का जो आपका रेड ओशन है, उसके अंदर आपने एक छोटा सा बॉक्स बनाया जिसमें जिसको आप क्लेम कर सकते हो. Nobody else can claim that because you're the only one who has that core differentiator. So this becomes your unique positioning. Now, unique positioning अगर आपका मिल गया, if it is strong enough, because root में तो आपका वो point of differentiation, मतलब what you can do and what is the core pain point of your audience, उसका perfect bridge है, right? So ये आपका एक बार मिल गया, this becomes your core promise, this becomes your brand truth. अब इसको लेके आप अपना पूरा ब्रांड का स्टोरी टेलिंग का लो, ऑटोमेटिकली you will create a white ocean for yourself. Does that make sense? Now let us look at a few brands that have done this efficiently. Before that, a basic um, nishkarsh of what we've discussed so far. We have the company, the 4 C's of strategy. Remember, company, category, customer, and culture. 4 C's के जो fundamental truths हैं, उसका जो center meeting point है, that becomes our brand truth. Clear so far? Let's see a few brands that have done that successfully. Getting clarity successfully. Tata. Tata, the moment you say Tata, the word Tata, the only thing that comes in the mind of all people is trust. But why trust? आया कहाँ से? Because in everything that they have, they consciously use the word देश का. So देश का स्टील, देश का नमक, देश की गाड़ी, देश का सब कुछ, रतन भी देश का. So this is their core. मतलब they are as a group company, they are into so many different businesses, and हर business के अंदर they have so many different competitors. But within that giant go, they have still created a niche for themselves just by consistent storytelling for years. एक ही चीज के ऊपर वो हमेशा बात करते हैं, देश का.
Also, Neha, can we take like 2 questions here that are related to this content?
Yeah, for sure. Please.
So Sanket asks, do you have any practical sample of gap analysis for reference?
In terms of a case study?
Yes.
No, as in, would you want me? So, for instance, if you're talking about, say, Paperboat, this is a great reference for a brand that identified a gap and then claimed that niche for themselves. Is this what you're asking for, or are you asking for a case study that we have done? I'm a little unsure of the question.
A detailed case study.
That's probably it's the content that I'll have to create. So I'm not sure if that's possible. What I can do is I can look for references of somebody who has done that already, because I'm sure somebody must have created a case study on the topic. So I can do a quick search, find something interesting, and share that with the team.
All right, perfect. We can move on.
So basically, is there any other source or any other premium, let's just say any industry, could be any material as well, anywhere where I can find case studies which are kind of self-explanatory? Because when I find this online, they're pretty much very basic and this where I cannot review much about brand and marketing as a whole. So what's your suggestions to, like, I can understand these two or three case studies, but if we want some more than half a dozen case studies which are actually in depth, any other sources that you guys recommend, or where can we find that sort of material? Because
So Joseph, before I answer your question, may I ask what is your objective behind reading these case studies?
so I'm a marketing executive right now. So more or less I want to add more credibility, because when I try to market these things, because it comes with experience, but there's a not a lot of brand happening at my end, and it just bits and pieces which is happening. So any experiences which I can learn from case studies will help me, like maybe better myself for the future is what I'm thinking.
Right. So, Joseph, I would recommend. So, first of all, we are going to share a set of reading list, and I can also plug in a few case studies with that. However, I personally feel that that is not enough. Now, if you really want to upskill yourself, having a structured learning process always is more beneficial as opposed to ad hoc, just referring to this, learning from that. So, this would be my personal recommendation, that you perhaps enroll for a course or something that teaches this subject in a more structured manner. However, for your ease of understanding and probably getting into this subject a little more in detail, we are going to share a few case studies, sorry, reading list, and we'll also add a couple of case studies along with that. But unfortunately, there's no repository, there's no library per se where people have uploaded case studies and documents, so on and so forth. So we don't really have that, but I'm sure there'll be some case studies somewhere. I know there is a website which I'm currently forgetting, but that has documentation of brand books. So let's say if you want to study the brand book of Burger King, you can find a detailed description of that. So that kind of a thing exists. Those libraries exist. But this specific case study of how people have approached branding and how they have sort of done their messaging around that and all of that, I don't think such a thing exists. We'll just have to find some, and we can do that. There's tons on Harvard Business Review, but yes, but not everybody has access to that. That's the only point,
Got it.
unless you're in academics.
So there's just one question when you're talking about the course, right? Are there any recommendations on our end which make sense? Because most of the courses I feel take online.
I think Vali
Is
will
it
probably be a better person to answer this question. But how about we take this up at the Q&A towards the end? Does that work? Somebody, Vali, for your this thing, somebody in the messages has also asked to share a link where we can see the brand books. Could you remind me? I'm forgetting the website right now, but I can share that with you,
Sure.
and you can make add that as part of the kit. But please remind me to tell you.
Sure.
Coming to paperboard, now this particular juice industry was dominated by Real and Tropicana, maximum market share. And वो उसको आके paper board with their unique positioning, with their singular positioning, they completely shook the market. They took away, I think, 15 or if not more percent of the market share, which is a huge number, right? For a new entrant to capture 15-20% of the market is a big deal. And since the beginning, they have just been talking about one thing: nostalgia. That's it. So, like I said, your unique proposition, the fundamental brand truth that you're offering, the promise that you're making to your customer may not necessarily be about features or benefits. You can find a great insight through your research and model your entire backend to work towards that insight. And that's where you create a niche for yourself. Now, this is one brand that has just spoken about one thing and just only one thing for probably more than 80 years now, which is real beauty. And they talk about, one fourth cream. That is the single point that they have been saying all these years. And uh, I'm so sorry, I'm very bad with names, but the person was talking about women hygiene and sexual wellness and all of that. I'm sure you will be able to relate with this because in the last 80 years, the kind of women, the type of women, your audience has evolved like nobody's business. From the time where we had pop up, the women to where we are now, the world has shifted. But this particular brand has remained relevant to all of these different kinds and types of women through this entire time scale using just one story. So, staying relevant, having that unique proposition, and staying relevant to things that are pain points to your audiences is extremely important. That's essentially the soul of branding. I hope that it makes sense. I hope it's clear as to what I'm talking about.
Yes, Neha.
All right. So now we've covered clarity, we move on to consistency. And brand is not built in one day, it's not built in 1 month, it's not built in a year, it's not built in 10 years. Branding, to build a strong brand, it takes time. Unless you have crores that you can invest in marketing, then you can become something like a Mama Earth. But that is like a fizzy bubble. It reached a peak and now it is that entire process is quite pointless. So when you're in the branding game, you have to look long term. You have to look at how are you going to consistently build on your proposition over the years. It cannot be okay, this year I'm going to do this, next year isme maza nahi aaya, let's do something else. You cannot be drawn by trends कि अभी 2025 का trending color is purple. Let's change it to lavender. Let's change our blue and green to lavender aster. Doesn't work like that. So when you have defined, after getting complete clarity, when you have defined your core positioning, you have to then ensure that that core messaging, that same tonality, that same messaging is reflected in every touch point. So if somebody is talking to you on the phone, or if they're looking at your website, or if they're looking at your social media, or they're talking to somebody from your call center, you're putting an ad, somebody's walking to your store, what have you, whichever touch point they need to create, they need to have your audience needs to have the same exact same experience. They need to leave that space with one thing in their mind, that X brand stands for X. Tata stands for trust. Volvo stands for safety. These are not random words, these are designed communication over the years. तो ये आपको कंसिस्टेंटली करना है अक्रॉस डिफरेंट टच पॉइंट फॉर मेनी मेनी ईयर्स, तब जाके आपका ब्रांड बनेगा. And finally, we get to consciousness. Now, remember this table from yesterday where we have the product, we deliver result, that brings trust, and then we look at the long-term picture, we create innovations, that becomes basis for our action. We test it, it's right, we deliver results. All of this circle follows with the process of feedback, redressal and audit, and with customer obsession at the center of it all. Does it make sense, everybody? Quick 100. In your emoji corner, add 100 if this has made sense so far. So, this in essence is the process of defining and creating and managing, like the framework, broad framework for approaching branding. But like I said, ये बहुत बहुत major overview है. इसके अंदर there are so many different frameworks for each of these stages. But since we are at a 1.5 hour broad timeline, we really can't go into a detailed course process. However, what I would like to end with is that you have your business, right? In your entire business process, if you just plug in this tiny little box of strategy, it will give your business direction. Direction to whom? To your core management, to your external and internal stakeholders, your marketing team, your sales team, which will eventually give a singular message to your customer, which will ensure you get repeat customers, right? It will help put everybody in your team run in a singular direction, a lot of clarity into why we are doing what we are doing and where we are eventually heading. And all of this running in a single direction, where the entire team is running with a singular vision, will lead to growth. तो ये छोटा सा बॉक्स एक बड़े haphazard से प्रोसेस को बहुत ही स्ट्रीमलाइन कर देता है, which eventually impacts your customer and which naturally impacts your growth. So good branding is good business.